Hello and welcome to Property Success Academy Success Tips. I'm Divya Mistry and I'm joined by Saj Hussain. Today we're just going to talk briefly about why invest in property. Now, a lot of people know that it's a good way of creating wealth. People don't know why, and so we're just going to explain the reason why. So, if you look at this graph, this is the real house prices by Nationwide Building Society. They're a fantastic building society who create great information about the property market all the time. Great resource to use. Just briefly, if we look at this, if you look at the red line, that's the trend in the house prices. So what this is showing us, the red line is the average increase in the house prices. So what this shows is over a number of years, the average house price has gone from around 70,000 to around 180,000 in the UK. So what does that mean? Well, it's increased in value. It's doubled over a period of, well, more than doubled over from 1976 to 2012. Now the blue line shows us the actual house prices. It's called the real house prices. Now, don't get caught up in what real means and what it doesn't mean, but what it basically means is that number, the value of the property, has been adjusted. So instead of the actual number, so instead of the value maybe today being 10,000 and next year being 20,000, so that's 100% increase. Inflation, so the cost of living, might go up by 10%. So what we have to do, we have to consider that that's gone up by 10%. So the actual amount might be 20,000, but it might only, in 10,000 in today's money, might only buy you £9,000 worth of goods in tomorrow in today's value. So what that means is, if Apple costs £1 today, tomorrow it might cost £1.10. So our money is worth less every year. So this adjusts for that. So this takes out that factor of, the fact that our money is worth less, and it averages it out based on that. So if you look, all the time the house prices are going above the red line and below the red line, and what they're doing is they're correcting themselves. So initially it's below and then above, then below. And the reason the market moves like this is because when we're in a recession, people think, oh, fantastic, or oh, property's a really horrible thing to invest in, it's not good. So people don't invest, apart from the investors, because they know it's a great time to buy. And then when property prices are kind of starting to increase, people go, oh, it might be a good idea to invest. But by the time the majority of people think it's a good to invest, we're at the peak and everyone's going, let's invest, and then someone goes, well, actually, can everybody afford these mortgages? And usually it's a no, and that's when we hit a crash. So it starts going back down again. And as long as we're above or below this red line, it has to go up or down. It has to correct itself. The only way it wouldn't correct itself is if it stayed on the red line, which actually is very, very difficult to control. It doesn't really happen. There's too many varying factors for anybody to control it at that level. So that's the reason why property is great, because it will increase in value over time and it will beat inflation, beat the cost of living. And what I mean by that is, say if you had £100 in the bank today, you might get 2% on that, but inflation, the cost of living, goes up by 3%. So in actual fact, what you can buy for that money today and the interest you get on it, so what you can buy for that money today and what you can buy for that money next year is less. Now, even with the interest on top of that, it's still less, because inflation is more than the interest that you've got on the money. So this is why property is a fantastic investment. Now let's just look at the capital side of it, keep it really simple. Right, so say you own a property. We've got to make some assumptions here. You own a property worth £120,000 and you don't have a mortgage on it. You go off to the bank and say, I want to borrow 75% of the value of my property, and the banker says, okay, we'll give you a loan for that, which is £90,000. So you take this pot of £90,000 and you split it into 3 pots of £30,000 each, which means that you can invest in 3 properties worth £100,000 each. Now, prices may vary in different areas. We're just making assumptions that each property you invest in is worth £100,000 each. So you take 30,000 and you buy property number 1 on the left, and you put a £25,000 deposit in. you put £5,000 worth of solicitors fees, financing fees and refurb fee costs, and the mortgage you get on it is 75% or £75,000. So you put £30,000 down, 25 of that being a deposit, 5,000 being your fees, and you bought a property. Then you go off and use the other 30,000, you buy another property exactly the same way, and you use the other 30,000 and buy another property exactly the same way. So in 10 years time, the first property you bought is now going to be worth 200,000, because on average property prices double every 7 to 12 years. So we'll take an average of 10 just for this example. We can't guarantee that, but roughly 10. Okay, it's worth 200,000, and property 2 is worth 200,000, and property 3 is worth 200,000, and the property you live in is now doubled in value from 120 to 240,000. Now what's important to understand here is if you just bought a residential property and you lived in it and 10 years later it doubled in value, you haven't actually gained any wealth. And the reason that is because although it's doubled in value, so have every single other property. So you're living in it. If you sold it, you'd only be able to buy the same type of property again. You wouldn't be able to buy anything bigger unless you put more money into it, buying a bigger property. So by investing, what we're doing is we're saying, well, okay, you know, the mortgage cost is covered, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but more importantly, these 3 properties, I don't live in them, they're going to double in value, and in 10 years time I can either sell them or remortgage them and get my money back, get some money out of the properties. So we're going to take the example that you remortgage these properties. Now if we only remortgaged up to 55% of the new value in 10 years time, so 55% of £200,000, then each property will have a mortgage of £110,000 on them, right? So property 1 will have a £110,000 mortgage, property 2 will have a £110,000 mortgage, and property 3 will have a £110,000 mortgage. That means there will be an equity of £35,000 released from each property. How do we work that out? Well, £110,000 remortgage minus the initial mortgage of £75,000 leaves us with £35,000. What this means is we get 3 lots of £35,000. Now 3 lots of £35,000 adds up to more than 90,000, right? So 3 lots of £35,000 will add up to £105,000, which means the initial mortgage we got out on the property that we live in, we can use 90,000 of that 105 to pay that off, and we'll have £15,000 left over. And that's the beauty of property. You still own 4 properties, you still rent 3 of them out, you still live in the one that you live in, and you've paid off the mortgage in the one that you live in. The other ones have 55% mortgages on them, and overall, you know, you've got a portfolio value including your residential property of £840,000. You've got mortgage of £330,000, and the debt on the property you live in is 0, and you've got £510,000 of equity in the properties that you've got. So if you sold everything, you'd have £510,000 in your bank. That's fantastic. So this is the reason why we should be investing in property, because you can double your money very, very quickly. So on the next video, on another video, I will show you what kind of returns to expect from renting the properties out.